Peace and love, y'all. It's your man, Manny Faces, welcoming an old time collaborator from back in the days to Hip Hop
Yeah,
Can
bro.
Save America. My man, my mellow, Chesney Snow, finally in
Yo,
the proverbial building. What up, my man?
yo, Manny, it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be a part of what you built. I've been watching your work build, over the years. It's really inspiring what you're doing. I'm just, yeah, I'm so honored to be here. I'm glad we could like make it happen,
Yeah,
and it's one of those things where it's like, it must be special, like time makes things special,
yeah.
so we took that time. But
Divine
yeah,
timing.
man, yeah, man, we came up. You were DJing, the American Beatbox Championships, when we had in Brooklyn. You was because I had heard of you from Birthplace Magazine,
Right. Sure.
and you were partnered. You were one of our our very early media sponsors. So you
Right.
were really, I think, instrumental in us kind of helping to build and get the word out, because I think at first, that was really hard,
Right.
trying to get, attention. And so you were really a part of that, and I'm thankful for that, man. But then I didn't know that you. I mean, like I knew you DJ, but you like really killed it, man. Like you were really doing it. So I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
Manny,
I appreciate
yeah,
that, man. I
yeah,
still
man,
spin, when I can, here and
yeah.
there. And thank you for that. It was really so let's start there. Obviously, you did run the American Beatbox Championships for many, many years in New
Hmm.
York City. We often talk about, us within hip hop, about the
Hmm.
neglect that some of the other elements,
Yeah,
receive,
yeah.
whether it's, break-in or, visual
Well,
arts, graffiti.
we're officially not an element
True facts,
of
but
beatboxing.
artistic
Yeah.
subgenres, whatever. And there's argument. People will argue that beatboxing
I'll argue
should be
with
an
it.
element. Yeah.
I'll argue with it. I think a lot
Yeah.
of the people that don't consider it an element may not have actually been watching the culture
Yeah. Yeah.
elevate
Yeah.
and rise to the level of fine artistry that it has become.
How did and your role was to
So yeah,
not to
I
document it, but to
yeah.
highlight it, to to celebrate it with that event series. How did all that happen?
Yes.
And
So I mean, like, so it came up. That's an interesting story. So it basically, as the culture was growing, in the early 2000s, and I mean, like, internationally,
right.
um, you know, even before YouTube, there were videos that you could kind of see, and it was really kind of growing in Europe. And and I always have love for everybody, but the thing that was kind of disturbing to me at that time was that the World Beatbox Championships, the logo of it was the continent of Europe, right?
Mm.
And it didn't stay that way, but that's kind of where it began. And so
Right.
for a lot of us in America, or just a lot of us just on this side of the hemisphere,
Right.
we're seeing that as the culture was growing, it was becoming less and less acknowledging. There was less of an acknowledgement of its roots, even though there would be beatboxers who were basically becoming famous doing like basically entire routines of Razel, Kenny Muhammad, kind of like this a generation of beatboxers who had really kind of popularized it to kind of like a higher level of art,
Right.
And so, as that culture kind of continued to grow, I felt that, to me, I often say this, to me, hip hop's kind of like a spirit. Like I feel connected to it in my spirit, right? And so I felt that it was like a responsibility, in a sense, to let the beatboxers here know about their lineage and their history and what beatboxing is really all about. for us, you know. So beatboxing to me, first and foremost, is about healing. You know, it's about becoming music. You know, it's about like you actually physically becoming music. You know,
Yep.
and so the idea of battling is like the fun, reunion you're getting with your peers and stuff.
Right.
So I sought to, once I had kind of established myself a bit as a beatboxer, you know, I was also doing shows in Europe. I was kind of moving, you know, at that time. You know, I was kind of among a group of beatboxers who were kind of like at the top of their game, I guess is what you'd say.
Right.
And I was like, okay, so I have the means, or at least the weight in the community, to be able to convene and start an American championships, because the world championships started in 2005, right? And so we didn't really start here in America, the championships, till 2010. Right. And one thing that I would just note that I wanted to just tell Eternia was that what she doesn't know is that I also co-founded the Canadian Beatbox Championships. So that same year, you know, I partnered with Jim Wild over at humanbeatbox.com, and we set to really put together that event here for the next generation of beatboxers.
Yeah, super dope. How many years did you were you at the helm of that?
Oh man, so that was about 7 years,
Yeah.
and then I, you know, I was at that time I was kind of going through a divorce, you know, and my life was kind of, you know, it was I had things that I really needed to tend to, and I think
I know how that goes.
You know what I'm saying? So I was like, yeah, I should take a step back, and there was some real good things. There were some good things for me to take that step back, not just personally, but just also artistically and professionally, because I had kind of the beatbox championships at that moment had kind of become my life. You know, it's like you work, you know how these things go. Like it's an international festival, so you're basically working on that the whole year.
Yeah. And that's why I don't do events. It's too much. I can't.
Yeah, it's a lot, man. Especially, well, you know, I think what kind of killed it was, like, at least here, was like it was so much harder to get sponsorship. It was so much harder to get that kind of high level sponsorship, because at least what we found was that, you know, once YouTube kind of, you know, absorbed a lot of the ad revenues, you know, a company is like, well, you know, why are we going to give you 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever when we're paying, you know, YouTube already, and the videos you make, you know, our ads are just going to go on those videos anyway. So why do we have to pay you? You know,
right.
So
for an event, a one day event,
for the event, and then the other thing, the reason why it kicked off over in Europe is because the government of Europe subsidized their art scenes.
Yeah. We've talked about that. I've talked about that so much, and it's such a difference of mindset. Like, you know, I talk about the La Place, the culture center in Paris, right, that they built out there, and my man JM, you know, who, you know, helmed that situation. That was funded by Paris. Like, it was funded by the city of Paris. Like, you know, and then I look at the, you know, the museum, you know, that's being built in New York, the Hip Hop Museum, and how many years and how much struggle to have to get, you know, funding and funding. It's such a struggle because in America, for some reason, we don't prioritize that kind of funding.
I think that it's I think it's that, but I also think that, you know, it's because we're so heavily propagandized, right? And what I mean by that is that, you know, the arts, you know, Frantz Fanon, the great writer, you know, had talked about, you know, one of the key or these things that a colonial power or a government and autocracy will do, you know, when they're taking power. And he's like, one of the first things that they do is they take arts out of the schools, they take arts out of that community, because that is that's celebrating the creative thinking, that's celebrating the thought, the human capacity, the human potential, right? And that's not necessarily tied to the state. And so the reason that, you know, you can go, and it's not to say that those countries don't matter, right? Like France and stuff, but like their military isn't holding up the Western, economic order, So that's one of the reasons why I think we find so much pushback. Even when we were at the Lavelle School for the Blind in the Bronx, doing the beatboxing, it's called Beat Rockers. Me and Taylor McFerrin, kind of, spearheaded that, and I did that for about 5 years before passing that down to the next gen of beatboxers. So that program, so phenomenal, but it was only made possible because we crowdsourced, we kickstarted, we actually, went to the people, with this hip hop program. And eventually, at first they laughed us out of the room, right? And that's the way I usually, I would say that the speech language pathologist at first, when we first wanted to talk with it was sort of like laughing us out of the room. It was like, we're really busy, you guys, thank you so much, right? Right. And then like a year later, they're blowing up our emails saying, wait a minute, there's something really happening here. Can we sit down and talk to you?
Can you just briefly, for folks that don't that just briefly for anyone who might be what that program entailed, just real quick what it was about.
So Beat Rockers was a program where me and Taylor McFerrin and Adam Mata had come in earlier days, but it was pretty much me and Taylor McFerrin would go to a school at the Lavelle School for the Blind. Now, this is a school in the Bronx that's very specialized school, meaning that students have visual impairments, but that's usually coupled with another condition, or so for example, some may be only able to communicate by pressing a button, with people. So it's and it's from, I believe, like kindergarten up to like 21 years old, and it's a public school, and on Gun Hill Road in the Bronx. And so what we would do is 1 to 2 days a week. I think it was around like 1 day a week, but we would go there and we'd get all the students there, and we would basically, Taylor would be on the Ableton recording these sounds that I would go in and make with the students, and we would just do kind of just take any sound that they could make and then start to figure out how we would create music for them. And Taylor would loop those sounds. We would all be beatboxing together. We put tracks to it, and we have this jam session, right? Those jam sessions started to become more and more structured, right? Because it was about communicating with each other. It's about sharing with each other. It's about being able to have these exercises, repetitive exercises that they can do for their speech, which is essential to speech language pathology, right? So it would be something that the kids could do, and they enjoyed doing it, right? Again, this is about becoming music. And so one of the things that we found just over the years, is that there was so much joy and community. Every year we made a mixtape, with all of their songs, and then we'd give those out to the families and people who would come to the event. And it was just a phenomenal experience, but everything cost a little bit of money, right?
Yeah.
And funding for these programs is, it's not easy to come by.
We're gonna try to change some of that. That's the next part of the work, right? Just real quick, from a speech pathologist standpoint, when they laughed you out the building in the beginning, but obviously afterwards they recognized what was happening here. What was some of their reactions from a professional standpoint? What did they see this program do that other methodologies didn't?
Well, one, what it did was we could get into very specific sounds, right? And we could develop exercises that became a part of their daily routine. That's actually one of the big challenges, right? It's like, can you get, you're trying to get somebody to make a specific sound. This is just the sound part, right?
Understood.
This isn't like the other forms. You can, work with the speech language pathologists to kind of create, teaching them some of these beatboxing techniques and sounds, figuring out like how you're putting the sounds that they need inside this kind of musical framework so that they can actually just enjoy doing this all day. And the more the repetitiveness, the more that you do it, the better that you become, and then you're able to kind of make these progressions. One thing that I'll say is, I've been doing this hip hop and education for a while now, not necessarily through the traditional academic tracks of how we, think about it. All due respect to everyone, what they do,
Sure.
But one of the things I feel about our work is that we the arts and the sciences are equal. They're not supposed to be put in this framework where one is more powerful than the other. And one of the things
competing
they have to work together. And one of the ways that I think they do really work well from the discipline standpoint is how they can heal us. And I don't mean just like some kind of emotional healing, which is necessary. I mean like actual healing. And one of the examples I bring up is of Gabby Gifford. For those of the people who don't know, Gabby Gifford was a representative. Her husband is Mark Kelly, the senator. She was a victim of gun violence, and she was shot in the head. Right. She survived that. Right. Then she was able to use music therapy essentially to rewire her brain. So it was because she had played the French horn, right? And because music activates more of the brain than almost any other part, right? More areas of the brain than other activities, right?
Right.
She was able to learn how to speak again, learn how to walk again, right? That was done through a form of music therapy. You have dance therapy, you have theater, you have, I think you have hip hop theater therapy,
Sure.
Which is what I work on.
That's right. And to that point, you're speaking very professorially now, which is of course now, which is fine.
Yeah.
No, but you're dropping some knowledge, you're dropping some science. And I just wanted to then point out, your current role. Obviously, if you've watched the other interview I did with your cohort members, your course creators, Eternia, and Dr. Francesca about the new course there at Princeton University. Tell me about your role at Princeton University for the last few years now, how you got there, what you've been doing, and then we'll talk about the course.
Wow. So, that's great. First, again, thank you for letting me be able to be in this platform to talk about it. I didn't think I'd be talking about this stuff. Because I've just been kind of out there doing it.
That's the thing. That's I recognize that everyone out there doing the work and they don't got time to I don't want to say market yourself. It's but actually spread the word.
I think we have time for it. I don't know that people I don't know that people really take the time to give us the platforms that we need to spread the information. But this my fourth. I'm going on year 4 here. I'm in the theater program, so I focus on community engaged theater, specifically working through choreo poems and other forms of theater that kind of in the lineage of hip hop theater, right? Or music theater. And I use that to develop courses, to develop events, and specifically to bring communities together to practice theater and have dialogue and discussions, right? So I will take students to, say, Memphis, where we create community choreo poems with people who might be nurses or young people dealing with gun violence or law enforcement or, social workers, and we put them together through an intensive process. And that process is about creating theater. And then we bring members of the community together to celebrate experience and to start to have discussions and dialogues, about, how how can we confront some of the issues that we have in our community that tear away our humanity for each other, right? I think that's one of the functionalities of art, right? Is that we're here to not just entertain people, right? But we're here to be able to like connect, like have our shared humanity connected to each other. It's like when you could go to, any city, and you play like an old hip hop track, for example. You throw on like some Nas or something like that, like New York State of Mind. Like like here and like that's like an anthem, but that song resonates, with no matter what hood you're in.
Right.
And so that is again our shared humanity. So where those tribal things, it's the same thing with like Outkast, like you don't have to be from ATL to, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
To think, that album is classic. And so that's one of the things that I do in terms of Princeton. The other thing is I started this course because we were doing those 50th events, and I was like really excited, and I wanted
just to remind folks, because it'll be in the thing, but the Women of Hip Hop course that you co-created. This is what we're talking about now. So this is it just started its first
it's the first year, and so the I was doing these I was getting ready to do those 50th events. That was a whole year long thing, right? Everyone was talking about like, what are we going to do? And I was kind of just coming to get settled into Princeton, and I was like, oh man, like I really want to do something for the 50th. I was like, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to reconnect with my homegirl Eternia. Like we were kind of like a beatbox MC duo, back in the 2000s in New York. And so like, I remember going to the executive director here at the Lewis Center, which is where the course is housed. And we were like, I was like, I really want to do something, and I want to build something here around hip hop to kind of honor and celebrate women in hip hop, and she said, great, Marion's great. She said, let's put some thought into it and not just kind of throw something up together, because we don't want it to be performative. If we're going to do something, let's really do something,
Fair.
And I deeply respected that. It gave me some perspective, because as I was doing a lot of the hip hop, events and so forth, that, I started to think, like really what is the, what is the story around women in hip hop, that kind of led me to having deep conversations and inviting Eternia. Eternia introduced me to Dr. Francesca. But I didn't want this to be, a course that was just about like, oh, let's look at the history and the socioeconomic, and, we're going to pull out the texts that exist and talk in this real academic, I don't want to call it jargon, but, it's like academic talk, and so I said, it has to be a performance course. It has to be something where you do the hip hop, even if you've never done it before. Because when I grew up, hip hop wasn't like a music you listened to, right? It was something everybody did.
Right.
Everybody, it was like on the playgrounds. It's like everybody was rapping. Everybody was trying to dance. Everybody, it was a way of life,
right?
As opposed to, like a
singular artistic thing that you might pursue in a
right. I mean, I couldn't draw for shit. You know what I mean? But I was trying. I was trying to tag my neck.
100%.
And so like I wanted this course.
I was gonna say I couldn't break, but I could do the WAP. So I was
but like, you could do that, yeah, man.
Like we did what we could do. We got it when we fit in. Yeah.
So I mean, like I felt like, I mean, and it might come off like, okay, so yeah, he's a performer. He thinks like this, right? But like, I really, one of the ways when I talk about beatboxing for people is especially like young kids, because now I do like a lot of workshops for, kids, maybe like families who might, you know, have documentation issues or something like that. Right. So I try to like do that kind of stuff now, like as opposed to like touring and stuff. Cause I don't, you know, I have a job now, so I can actually go and do,
there you go.
You know what I mean? I can go and do some of the other things I really love to do.
Yeah.
And so what I always tell them is I'm like, yo, you know, if you can say the alphabet, then you can beatbox. Right. And that's how we come into it. Right. Like if you could say the alphabet, you could beatbox, and that gets everyone at least trying. Right. There's so many of the, I think for so many years, you know, kids get told so many things they can't do. Right. That it starts to kind of build up in them. Right. I mean, a lot of the stuff, you know, we were able to do because we didn't know we couldn't do it. Right.
Right. We just did it.
We just did it.
Just did it.
You know, and that's what made us really innovative. You know, we made the, I was a part of the team that made the Beat Thing. I don't know if any of you guys know the Beat Thing, but the Beat Thing was this, it was like a portable MPC, right? And it was, you know, it was a beat thing. Like it was basically, it was, you know, it was a music technology, you know? And so we, you know, I was part of the sound team, you know, doing
designing the
all these designing the sounds.
Yeah.
We got the thing in the Guitar Center. We got the thing in the Best Buy. Like we
sort of an accessible drum machine.
It's an accessible drum machine, and it was a pretty amazing piece of equipment. Actually, it was ahead of its time, you know. And we were working out of Nashville. The core team was out of Nashville, and you know, to me, it showed like these brothers who were, well, we were all some brothers who had an idea and a dream from hip hop, who came from hip hop, you know, and said, you know what we want to do? We want to design a beat machine, right? And that's crazy to people, right? Only the designers somewhere in Germany or something design the beat machines, you know, and
Dr. Rhythms and all that.
Yeah.
From our, now we do it from our perspective, from our mindset. It's not going to be the same as a drummer. You know, you probably have a team of drummers who are like, let's be, you know, they're like, we don't even drum. This is our drum. So how would we make it?
You know,
it's remixing every idea. It's what we do.
Yeah, man. And and what we got now is we've got technology, you know, we've got, in terms of like what hip hop has, you know, like as it leads, right?
Yeah.
We've got, you know, we've got technology, we're soaring in academia, right? Like at some point they laugh you out of the room, right?
Sure.
And then they're like, wait a minute, you know, we be stupid, right? to laugh them out of the room because we could see, the genius in it, and so then you become accepted, right? And then you lead. Now, I think keeping your integrity,
right,
you know,
and fighting against co-option and all the other things that can come from that,
you know.
that continues to be the fight, and
that's the only thing I have some regrets about in terms of like beatboxing, right? Is that, you know, in kind of stepping away from the scene for a minute, and then, you know, we lost like another leader in the scene here. His name's Kid Lucky, who really kind of, you know, was instrumental in the beatboxing movement.
100%. Good friend,
you know,
good friend.
Yeah. And, you know, is that the culture right now has become a bit toxic, you know, because of leadership that isn't really from here, that really isn't connected to an ethos of hip hop.
Right.
And so for a lot of women, it's become very toxic. For a lot of people of color, it's become toxic, right? You know, like when people say, well, why don't you see that many like black beatboxers or beatboxers of color? Like, you know, because they, you know, most of us are like, we don't have wealth, right? So those beatboxers who might be growing up in Chicago and seeing the stuff happening online, they can't afford a plane ticket to Switzerland. Right. You know, like they can barely afford a Greyhound to New York. Right. And where are they going to stay?
Right.
So the culture, you know, has become exclusionary.
Right.
Of people, right?
Yeah.
And
this might mirror also what happens in the breaking, community, for example, as well. I mean, so people look at the the Olympics and say, it's so worldwide. It's not ours anymore. It's like, well, there are regional competitions around the United States, but you got to be able to get to them, and you got to be able to, all the things. We have I've talked about freestyle sessions. They do some great stuff. Obviously, the Red Bull stuff, but same thing. Like you have to be able to go and take off work and do and get to these places. And sometimes it's the people who have a little bit more means are the ones that are able to follow those roads.
Yeah, man. No, you're absolutely right. And I think it just kind of goes back to like why I feel like you're so inspiring, man. Like because people actually have to go out and do the work, right? like we have to stop the celebrity worship stuff, because and I'm not saying that I'm not trying to call out any particular celebrities and stuff, but like
I do,
but they have to. Well, for example, I'll give you an example. People were like, people saw the flyer for Miss Education, right? And they're like, oh, looks like Cardi B's on there. Why is Cardi B on there? Oh, I see these comments. I'm like, okay, so first of all, think of whatever you want to think about this celebrity, right? But I know that celebrity goes into the hood, right? To places like the Fortune Society in New York, where women are coming home from prison that have nothing, right? And there's no cameras there, right? This isn't something she's putting up on social media, right? And she spends the whole day with them, right? She donates money to actually provide for those people who are the most vulnerable. Right. So whatever we say about what we think about Cardi B's this or Cardi B's that, right. What I see, right, because I worked in that space, because I'm there, right, is that she showed up. Right. I didn't see anybody else show up. Right. But she showed up there.
Yeah.
In the homeless shelters.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
With no camera. So, whether or not I like her music or think of her this or that, right?
And those things are also worthy of discussion. Like these are social,
absolutely.
So that's absolutely. And what better space to say it in a place with young minds are growing and having these conversations about, which can come in into these courses, into these spaces as well. It's fine to talk about all that stuff, but it's also like, don't throw the real hip hop activism out with the mumble rap bathwater. Oh, you know what I mean?
Now, bro, I don't get it, bro.
So it's like, we can't just all,
Yeah, no, I was like, I feel so blessed, when people were, when you said something at the beginning about, we're the old heads now. We're the old school heads. We're the middle-aged, whatever,
Sure. Yeah.
And like, man, I'm so thankful for that. We
get the opportunity to do these things. And listen, I also want to point this out before I forget. You've always been an activism-minded guy. Like I remember you setting up town hall. You did town halls. Maya Azuzena was there. I was there. Like you've done things with a community-minded, upliftment of the community, anti-racism, like all the things throughout the years, and you were able to incorporate that with your performing, right? But now I'm just thinking about what you just said about this, because why I like this course so much is that even the other coursework you did, making choreo poems, working with people in the communities, that is activism. And it's coming from a hip hop DNA. It's like, this is how a hip hop head is going to do activism. It doesn't just like this is how a hip hop head go make a beat machine, a drum machine, right? You're saying it doesn't have to be a protest song. I don't have to go out and do a protest beatbox performance, but you're in a position now where you're saying, well, I'm in academia, I'm at an Ivy freaking League college, for God's sakes. I have some resources, I have a partner, like you said, you mentioned, who runs the center. We can make some of these things happen. I'm speaking as you, you're never gonna come in without that activism, upliftment of my people and my communities, several communities that you're a member of, and those that you advocate and are in allyship for. It's going to It's going to come with you no matter what you do. That's the thing about our generation of hip hop heads, is that we take it with us wherever we go. And when we're given the chance to really use it in these spaces, then brilliance happens.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, one of the things that I really feel in my heart is the core of our survival as a people and a nation, is that, you know, I think people are kind of looking for these savior kind of figures a lot of the time, whether that's a celebrity or a politician, et cetera. Right. And what's been at the core of, I think, of this country is the labor movement is what really kind of put forward a lot of the basic things of these so-called rights that we think of.
Sure.
And when you look at that history, what you begin to really see is that, you know, your freedom, the change in your community, it's not going to come from some sort of electoral politics. It comes from the work that you do every day. It comes from the what you spend your energy on doing every day, right? Is the only thing that's going to change your life, your community's life, right? And so I think right now, you know, because of this, like what's happening in the world, you know, you know, our country is really, I feel like our communities are really going to have to kind of put that credo through the spine again, you know?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, you know, Lyndon Baines Johnson wasn't somebody who was like, you know what I should do? I should sign the Civil Rights Act. And, but you know, and I should
definitely wasn't get some saying that.
No, not at all. you know, but it was those people, and it might only have been a few people. It wasn't everybody, right? Who spent every day of their waking hours committed to not going to vote, right? Because they didn't have that.
Right.
But going to change that system. Right. And it took all of their efforts, you know? And one of the things that I remember the great Harry Belafonte told us, you know, because I was blessed to be able to like meet him, and he was producing this project that I was working on, Breon Bang, right? Is like he said, they won every battle of the civil rights movement. Every battle they went into, they won, right? And he said they lost the war, and he said the reason they lost the war was because after they had, you know, gotten all of those things accomplished, right? They took a breath, right? Like,
right.
We made a step forward. And he said, in that single breath, right, their enemies had reconvened, restructured, reorganized, built their resources again, right? So that they would then figure out how they would overturn it. And they have a long game strategy, you know?
They do.
You know, and you know, so there's something that like, it just reminded me of, you know, when marriage equality was passed, right? And I remember when it happened that week, right? Because there was a big celebration of that. Like finally they had spent all of these years, this movement, to be able to get to this point. I mean, you know, how can you not want to celebrate with them, right? With people who've been struggling in that lineage, you know?
Sure.
But if you really recall that week that the Supreme Court did that, right? That was also the same week that they gutted the key provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which then later on would put us in the situation that we are in today. It goes back to that what Mr. B was talking about. Mr. B, Harry Belafonte, you know, instrumental in hip hop, right? He was the first producer of he was the main producer of Beat Street, right?
That's right.
But I know that you know, as I was going around doing this work, you know, I was trying to work on taking the choreo poem, right? And figuring out ways in which I could integrate that with technology, with like immersive VR and AI,
right,
to kind of develop systems from that. And, I was talking with one of my colleagues here. I'm blessed to call a colleague, Ruha Benjamin, and she like opened up my mind, as she does everybody's mind, but, she was basically like, during slavery, that system had existed for so long, right? That if you're living in that system and you've got generations that have lived and died in that system, no matter what you think, it's hard for you to imagine another system. If you're like living in that, right? Your great grandfather was a slave and died, and your great grandson is going to be a slave and die, right? And so you're in that water, that ecosystem, and when you're in that ecosystem, the most important thing for us to be able to do is not lose our imagination, right? It's to make certain that we understand that this does not have to be this way, right? That it's actually antithetical to life, to kind of power your system by death, right? And this is one of the things that I even when you think about like hip hop, and we're going to talk about something, I love hip hop, right? I do. It's a part of who I am, inside and out. I remember like listening to music, and I remember like I would, how we like memorize the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like one day I was like a teenager or something, and I was listening to like, I don't know, it was like Bone or something like that. And so I'm like saying the lyrics, and I'm like, wait a minute, like if I really start thinking about this, like it sounds like I'm repeating, like I'm listening to music that's saying they want to kill me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, because it's direct, like I'm gonna do this to you. I'm gonna kill you.
Right. The proverbial you.
The proverbial you.
Right. But now it's like,
but I'm listening to it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about like what is that? And not to harp on Bone. I love Bone. I still rock some Bone. Right.
Of course.
But I started to kind of think about like the darkness of some of the music, right? And when you kind of push forward that kind of death, you're powering that with death, then death comes, right? Like I have to think about, like, sometimes I think about, like, I remember, we all remember 1996 Pop dies. If you don't remember that, like at our age, you probably weren't living in hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, right. I know, like, I was a teenager. I broke down in tears.
I know exactly where I was when I heard. It's one of those. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one of those moments, right? It's like 9/11, really.
Yeah.
And, for years, he was so impactful that, there was all sorts of, he ain't dead and he's dead. And you know what I mean? Like, but in the, whatever quarter of a century later, as we've become adults, I have to wonder, like, I think Buster was talking about this. It's like, if you say that, if you speak those words constantly about, death, death, death. Well, I wonder if he hadn't spoke that, would the universe have provided an alternative?
Right.
And I think that we have to think about that in terms of like how we show up in our communities. We can't be in despair, because despair is the fuel of despotism, right?
Well said.
And so the right now we are at this critical juncture for sure, but it's not new. If somebody's coming to you, to us saying, "Oh, we dictatorship, autocracy," right? Well, tell it to somebody living in Jim Crow,
right?
Right. Tell that to somebody who was working in the mines in Virginia, right? That we just now got, authoritarian,
right?
I think that now what we have to do is like really look at what those systems of resistance were. And the hip hop was a part of that. Right?
Yep.
100%. So yeah. This was a good, see, we could go back and forth, man. I get it. I love what you're doing.
I appreciate that appreciation. I appreciate that perspective. And I think that that's probably where the solution, like, I wrote Hip Hop Could Save America. I wrote a book and it says inspiration for the nation from a culture of innovation, not solutions. I would be so presumptuous to say I have the solutions, but I know that the inspiration is here from the culture, from the people that have been, involved in it, because it's not just following in those same systems. It's kind of what you're talking about here. We saw the labor movement, we saw the civil rights movement, we saw and where they succeeded and where they failed, where they took a breath. I think that's brilliant. And saying, well, what would hip hop do? How can we take our positions and take those things and remix it, smack it, flip it, rub it down, but basically invent the thing that hasn't been invented yet, which is the real movement, or the real movement of movements, or the collective of collectives, to try and solve a lot of these problems. And I think that the answer comes from these conversations. I think the answer comes from folks like you, humbly, folks like me, but more like the 100-something people I've talked to on the show, which all have the same kind of ethos that you and me do. And we're just trying to find the best ways now to, as the middle-aged, hip hop heads, to apply it in the places where we can make the most impact. Push back against it being co-opted, push back against the forces of the industries that are just making money off of this stuff. But we're out here, man. We're doing this work. You're doing this work.
Yeah, we are, man. Maybe the last thing I want to say about this is like, one of the things I really loved about what Immortal Technique and Hassan Salam and that kind of group of people that we kind of came up with in that New York hip hop era, was that, like, and I just know them specifically, or Eternia is kind of doing this on Instagram now, but like they actually took the resources that they were getting from their music and they went out into the world and they actually affected and did something for people, who were at the most vulnerable space. Yeah. And I remember this is when I started to have some issues with Jay-Z, because I used to listen to Jay-Z, right? I used to listen to Jay. I still listen to Jay, right? But at the time when I was doing that project that Mr. Harry Belafonte was on, Mr. Belafonte gave him a little bit of critique, right? Basically saying that him and Beyonce could do more.
I remember this. This made news.
Right. Yeah. This was news, right? And and he was speaking that. Let's just provide some context, right? Like he was speaking that from from this place of like those artists who were at the top of their game, the top of their financial prowess of that day. Your Nina Simone's, your Harry Belafonte's, your these big stars. They funded the movement. Right, they literally took, like, Mr. B, right, Mr. Belafonte, right. He basically educated all of King's family. He made sure that King's family was okay, because that was his promise to Dr. King, because they knew what Dr. King was facing, right. And so so kind of fast forward to that time, come back to that time where Jay-Z, is taking in that criticism. And then that lyric was where he was like, boy, he put out this thing where he's calling Mr. B a boy. It didn't sit right with me. You know what I mean? And so it started to make me think, like, and again, I love, Jay's work, in terms of his, he's, dope MC, and very successful, right? But those people who we idolize as celebrities, right? Like those people should actually be helping to fund the movement. The stuff that happens in Minneapolis, for example, right? Like, who pays for all those whistles?
Right. right.
that they
right.
used? Who pays for it?
Right.
Who provides the bottled water? Who's actually like, you got to be able to feed people in a revolution. You can't have a revolution if everybody's out here starving. Right.
That's why they want us starving.
That's why they want us starving. And so, I think if we're really serious about like changing the system, like we have to look at some of these basic things, right, that we need in order to be able to do that. So if you look at Fannie Lou Hamer, for example, Fannie Lou Hamer, icon of the civil rights movement, right? A singer, right? So she's an artist, right? So she's she's an artist who's at the forefront of the movements of her day, right? But she was a farmer,
right?
She developed co-ops so that the people in her community could eat,
right?
Because if they can't eat, they can't march.
Amen.
Okay. So yeah, that's what we got to do, bro.
I do a lot of talks myself nowadays, as you know, and I'm often speaking about the intersection of hip hop and social justice. And it's funny, not funny, but it's telling that you mentioned, of course, Immortal Technique, Hassan Salam, and I talk often about Majesty. You remember Majesty, who used to run with them, the late great Majesty, and he's to me the epitome of this. Yeah. With a Hassan, so I tell this story all the time in my lectures about this stuff. There was a album release party, Hassan Salam album release at Webster Hall. And at the time, Majesty, who was working with organizations like Justice League New York and Cop Watch, and who went to Palestine and who went to Cuba before it was like, in the news, quote unquote, because it was been having problems, doing workshops with youth, doing, fighting against human rights violations in those places through his artistry, but also locking arms with protesters, to protest against the killing of Eric Garner. Majesty was coordinating with Ferguson demonstrators when Michael Brown was killed by police to coordinate, make sure we have protests out in St. Louis, but also in New York. And one of the greatest things that I thought he did, which I amplify this all the time, and it's to your point, is that at the album release party, Hassan Salam's album, you had, you have merch tables, you have like T-shirts, and you're selling CDs, because they were selling CDs back in time. CDs, younger people, if you remember, are actually little circular. Anyway, But and then he had one of the merch tables in the album release party was Cop Watch. He brought them into the album release party. He brought them into the club. Now, Cop Watch, for those who don't know, you remember Cop Watch was an organization that would teach folks to, your rights when it comes to filming engagements with law enforcement, right? So whenever someone would get stopped and frisked or pulled over or, being arrested, and you could film them. And this was before, like, it's kind of common knowledge now, but back then, the police would tell you don't have the right, you can't do this, move back, take your phone. And they were like, no, you have the rights, and we're teaching the community members how to do this. This was Cop Watch. Now, we wouldn't know that George Floyd was murdered. We wouldn't know that Alex Preddy and Renee Good were murdered if not for people filming them. I'm not drawing a direct line, but saying it's that kind of work that Majesty was doing. And to bring it into the club, the album release party, so that they're there and talking to the people from the communities where the over-policing is taking place and where all this is happening, to me, that's more impactful than a celebrity making a protest song. And we don't need celebrities like we did in the 60s to call attention to something that isn't getting like we needed Bob Dylan to write about Hurricane, the boxer. You know what I mean? We don't need that now. We have social media telling us everything we need to know. All of the issues are out in the open. What we don't have is people doing that kind of work getting amplified, because they're the ones that are actually making an impact on the ground level. And I tell that story, and rest in peace to Majesty. I mention them every time.
Yeah, rest in peace, man. Like
it's those heads that were doing that work.
Sometimes, just kind of thinking about this brother, because it's like he's, he was. It's just like he was such an authentic energy force 100%. To be around, and like even now, the fact that most people around the world in like terms of hip hop, no idea who this brother is, but his impact was like so massive,
Yeah, 100%. He's in this retell like telling this and talking like you're talking about him is in the introduction to my book. It was that important. He is fundamental, and he is that model I mean, like I said, the energy, the legendary cipher is still going on 10 years later. Every Friday night, 8 p.m. to midnight, Union Square subway station from May to November. I always shout out my brothers at Legendary Ciphers. They're still out there carrying on that legacy. That's how impactful, and they'll do it because, and they'll tell you, they'll be like, we're doing this because we're keeping Majesty's, legacy alive. And it's like, there's there's only one Majesty, but there's other Majesties, right? There's other people doing this work, and that's why we got to amplify them and put them in places and bring them to the colleges and have them speak. And
and that's definitely like, one of the things that I tried to do over my career, was like, if I'm going into some place, if I'm able to crack some place open, like the very first thing I'm doing is bringing the people with me.
That's right.
Bringing in, so like even, I created this film called American Beatboxer. It's a documentary. It did fairly well, it got us to go to Harvard. And so I had my first residency at Harvard. They were like, you want to come to Harvard and screen your film and do some beatboxing. And I was like, I want to do it if I can bring all these other beatboxers with me.
Right.
If I can bring 10 other beatboxers with me, and because I want to bring those young people with me, because they amplify, right? And it amplifies them.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes I feel like, in the industry, there's like this sort of kind of scarcity thing, right? Where it's like, I got in there, so I'm good, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, why you want to co-sign? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But the reality is that, that's just a colonial mindset that actually, ends up taking the wealth that you have, because you're the more that you build up other people, right, the more successful you will become. I remember my I was teaching at this high school in Brooklyn, and a friend of mine, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, had just won their first Oscar for this Let It Go, right, which was a song on Disney's Frozen.
Right.
And I was so excited, man, because because they were friends, and like all the whole team, we was all watching the Oscars, because I had never had anybody like that I knew that was even not ever nominated for an Oscar.
Right.
I mean? So I was like, I was gonna watch, and then Jamie Foxx was presenting their award, right? And so he comes, he gets on the microphone, and before he does anything, he just starts beatboxing. I'm like, what? Why is Jamie Foxx beatboxing? I was like, they're gonna win, right? I was like, I knew it, they were gonna win, and then they won, right?
Yeah.
And so they won, and of course, we're all going crazy as friends, and because we love these guys, and like, so we immediately, are blowing up their phones, and I asked them if they would come to speak to my students, right, in Brooklyn, who would never have an opportunity like this in that school, right?
Right.
And or it never existed before, right? And so I was like, okay. And she said yes, right? She said, we'll definitely come. Now this was in the chaos of them. They had no idea what was going to happen to their lives, right? Like after they won this Oscar, right? And the day of them coming to visit came, and they were like, they came in looking like they hadn't slept. Of course, they hadn't slept because they were in a delivery room for their family, because like they were having a birth that night. And so they had been in the hospital the whole time, but they didn't cancel. They didn't say, hey, we can't do that.
Right.
And they could have easily have done that.
Sure. And understandable.
And it would have been understandable.
I get it. Yep.
But they came. And so I took them and my students, and we went to Bricks, which is like a community center in downtown Brooklyn. And we set up a way for them to kind of sit back, and they had all these questions, geared up. And one of the students asked, essentially, what's the what's the secret to your success? Like what when did you know you were going to be successful? Right. And I remember, I love Bobby. Bobby, if you're watching this, I love you, bro. He said, it happened when I realized that my work wasn't about showing everyone how great I am. I became successful when I figured out like how my work serves other people and to make other people great. Right. This is an EGOT winner, you know, EGOT winner, Robert Lopez, you know, the youngest EGOT winner at that time. You know what I mean?
Come on now.
And just hearing that really kind of stuck with me and amplified, you know, like what is my purpose? You know, is my purpose to try to, you know, be the best actor or the best beatboxer or the best director, right? Or is my purpose really about using all of my energy and efforts, right, to amplify all those people around me to kind of show them the potential of their greatness? Because then that, I feel, is really greatness, right? You know, we've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. The thing is, right now, when I feel like at least me, I'm only going to speak for me, but like growing up, I kind of felt like I had this, the history had kind of happened already, right? That there was a civil rights movement and there was slavery and there was these world wars and all of that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
That had happened. And now when I'm reading history and I'm seeing the struggles that they did to give us some of these kind of basic things that we have kind of come to take for granted, right? Like, we're not going to miss that struggle. We're going to have to come forward now, right? Like, and join the people that are actually doing it and show up in those spaces with hip hop in a way that is, I think, able to listen. You know, I think we need to be able to bring our skills into that space and help amplify, like you do, you know, these movements, because you're going to be against algorithms, you're going to be against interests, you know. And so the power of the word and the message is probably one of the most critical things to get to people, you know. And you know, I'm interested to see what we do, you know, in the next couple of years, because we are going to be facing it, you know. Like I learned with my mom, last thing, top of 2020, everything shuts, right? Like I had these shows lined up, right? I was going to do my third Carnegie Hall headlining thing. I was like, yo, things was moving.
I had some good stuff lined up, man.
You know,
oh man.
You know,
yep.
And so it shut down.
Yeah.
And I was going through a breakup at the time. And with my daughter's mother, she later became my daughter's mother's interesting, and I had to leave. You know, I wanted to get out of New York, and so my mom had purchased this little farm outside of Minneapolis on the Wisconsin side of the border, and you know, this was pretty amazing because for those people who probably don't know my story, you know, my mom kind of came up, you know, we were kind of working our way up from things like, you know, women's shelters and really kind of working our way up from the bottom. So it was like really inspiring to see her like go back to school and become a respiratory therapist and buy a little farm, right? And where she was raising chickens and goats and stuff like that. And when the pandemic happened, I understood like what it meant to be revolutionary, because in that moment where everything shut down, my mother had her own water supply, her own water filtration like system. She had basically her own power. She had her own food supply because she raised her food. She knew what chemicals went into her food, into those animals, right? She had toilet paper stocked up in it, like canned vegetables. Like it was almost like her own little bunker,
like a survivalist,
like a survivalist, and she had the guns to go with it, in case anybody wanted to take from her,
of course,
right? And that, to me, that was really revolutionary, because at the end of the day, you could, if we're going to be activists, this is what I loved about like the Black Panthers and Fred Hampton, and these were like, what's the number one thing you do? Oh, people got to eat. I mean, and so when I went to my mother's place, I like, I realized like, oh my God, like the pandemic's happening out there, but right here, I'm just sitting in nature. I'm not worried about anything. And it didn't mean that I wasn't affecting me, because I was seeing it affecting family. I was seeing it affecting me. And then I could see the smoke rise, because we're right outside of Minneapolis. Right. Then it went, then that's when it became real.
Right.
Because I could go and I could see that revolution happening. Yeah.
That perspective. And again, everything you've been talking about in the last, few moments.
Hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But specifically, that idea of amplifying others, that the lessons are out here for all of us if we just hear them. Like, just knowing about your mom now that's a piece of the puzzle for me, and everything we've gone through in our lives, and especially when you're intentional and purposeful about doing that, listening and amplifying. My dad was a college professor. All he did was the same thing. It's knowledge. It's knowledge, and that's the knowledge cipher, right? Just sharing information.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's why I do. I wrote my first book is just filled with other people. I just put all these interviews in a book. I just gave you a little bit of my thought process, but
man, I can't wait to read the book, man. Like, I gotta get a copy of this book.
I'll get it to you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's great that you talked about like our parents. My mom's just inspired me so much, and one of the things that I felt was like the pandemic forced her to go into retirement because she had a type of cancer, and so she was vulnerable, right, during the pandemic. So she could no longer work in the emergency room, right, and so she was kind of forced into an early retirement.
Yeah.
But one of the things like now that's so just like inspires me, man, is that, it's struggle for her now because her medical expenses are so astronomical.
Yeah.
And this is a woman who is an Army veteran, right? Who served her country for 4 or 5 years. Right. This is a woman who spent 20 years working in an emergency room as a respiratory therapist, literally saving people's lives, holding their breath in her hands. Literally, literally, she'd have to use her hands to keep people breathing, And so to think that we live in a society that now says, you know what, but your healthcare doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like I think like I get so tired of people saying like, civilization, right? Because there's nothing civilized about this. There's nothing civilized about this situation that we live in. And just because like literally right now I am in an ivory tower, like my office is at the top. I'm looking at this is literally a tower.
Right.
But I would say that like I have no illusions about how I got here, and where I came from. And so, I would love to join with people if people want to, connect with me. I'm really like, I think we really have to get it to, become a part of these movements, because the movements are going to need us no matter what you do, whether you're a computer software programmer or you're a dancer, an artist, or you're working in building services as a janitor. The movement needs us to like put our minds and our bodies against this machinery.
Yeah. Amen to that. And listen, I always say, very few things bring people together across all the demographics, across all the borders, across all the divisions, like a good hip hop cipher. So
yeah, man, this was a great cipher with you, brother.
Oh, 100%, man. Long overdue. It was just great, just kicking it. And I hope everyone I know people got some gems and some inspiration out of it. Tell the folks who do want to reach out to you. And I've got some things in mind we're going to talk about later cool. as well that I'm working on, in the background. But for in the meantime, tell people who do want to reach out or learn more about the course or learn more about your performing and whatever. How do they reach out? All the end of interview things. How do people find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me at Chesney Snow. I'm on social media, not on social media, but I usually answer messages from social media. But I try to, put a little bit of distance between me. But if you really want to hit me up, you can hit me up, via Princeton's website. My email is chesneysnow@princeton.edu, if you really seriously want to get at me. chesneysnow.com, if you want to learn more. I'm always down to collaborate and rock with people. If you want me to come I have a great workshop that I do with kids. I love working with kids. It's called Kindness is My Superpower. I think it's really important for us to kind of think about like what is power now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've always been a superhero to me. Like I said, I watched you all those years doing the beatbox championships, and I'm like, this is someone who puts others first. And now hearing about your mom, I know where you get it from.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, man.
This is great.
Listen, good kicking it with you, man. And listen, I come back and forth up top, a few times a year. So I got
man. Let's do. And you down in ATL, man. I love ATL, bro.
Yeah, man.
Y'all got the food. Y'all got the food game a lot.
Listen, I'm telling you, for a New Yorker that's very arrogant about his city, Atlanta's not the worst place to be. So I'm okay.
It's good.
I'm okay down here. But I'd love to come hang out with you. Let's
make something
among the
happen.
ivy.
Yeah. Let's make something happen, bro. And put some hot sauce on some catfish for me down there.
Come on now, I got you. Yes, sir. All right, my man. Good talking to you.
Salud, man.
Peace.
Manny Faces. You sick for this one.